Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am your host, Kiana Canada, and today we are going to be talking about, we're continuing the theme, the International Day for the Prevention of Violent Extremism, as and when conducive to violence. We're continuing that theme. And so before we go ahead and get into today's topic, I want to ask you to subscribe to this channel. So I am currently on Rumble, and so I want you to go ahead and subscribe to my Rumble channel. And also, I want you to subscribe to my YouTube channel at Real Kiana Canada, at Real Kiana Canada. I do have an announcement right now. The United States of America has locked me out of uh, my YouTube account, where I've been actually streaming most of my videos. The United States has actually locked me out of that account. And ladies and gentlemen, I think the United States locked me out of the account, or individuals working in concert with the United States. So this is the United States and the Republic of Ireland. If you've been following my story, you understand that I have been going through transnational repression. Yes, that's correct. Transnational repression. That's where countries reach across their borders to silence the dissent of their citizens. And they do this in a number of ways. And so, one of the ways in which they do this is by digital threats, by hacking into their citizens' accounts, stopping their followership, stopping their upward social mobility, and really intimidating them. So behind the scenes, behind the camera, the state is behind the cameras, behind these computers, these intelligence agencies, and they are engaging in transnational repression, which is essentially an intimidation practice that is being put into circulation, not only by authoritarian regimes, authoritarian regimes, but also, ladies and gentlemen, countries such as the United States of America and the Republic of Ireland. So I want to say that with this International Day for the Prevention of Violent Extremism, as and when conducive to violence, what it does is it invites all member states, including civil society and the private sector, academia, and the media, to commemorate the International Day through educational and public awareness raising activities, and to share best practices in this regard. And this is what I'm going to be doing in this video, ladies and gentlemen. I am actually going to be speaking very critically about some events that are happening within the United States, building on that International Day for the Prevention of Violent Extremism, as and when conducive to violence. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you have been following my last two videos, I'm going to look now to see if those videos if they're even public. I don't think they're even public. And they may or they may not be, but when let's see, those are public, but the state is angry at me. So now the state has locked me out of my account. So remember, I wasn't locked out of my account before. I recently published a video a couple of days ago, and ever since I published that video, that was not really consistent with the state's narrative on national security. The state locked me out of my account. So let's go ahead and get into today's topic. Ladies and gentlemen, there was an incident that took place in the United States. It was an event of extremism with a gentleman named, I believe his name was, did I write that name down? Let's see. Let me look that. Furman, I believe. The reason why I didn't actually log that down was because, ladies and gentlemen, the United States is really really being very repressive, such as the United States and the Republic of Ireland are doing very repressive. Let's see, can I find that article? Yellowstone. Let's see. News. So there was at Yellowstone National Park, ladies and gentlemen, there was, okay, let's see, there we go. So, ladies and gentlemen, at Yellowstone National Park in Wyoming, there was a man that he was going through radicalization. And so basically he had gone through a period of radicalization, and somehow he found himself at Yellowstone National Park. He entered a room where a woman was within this room, and he, I think, tried to buddy up to her. And so I'm just going to read you what this says. Now, ladies and gentlemen, please bear in mind that what I'm reading is from CBS News. It is published by Alex Sunby. So Alex Sunby is the journalist's name. And so any discrepancies that may be in this article, anything that may change, so I cannot be held responsible for that. I did do my due diligence before I came here to try and make sure that this story was authentic. There was a lawsuit attached to this particular story. I haven't been able to authenticate and verify that lawsuit, so I'm not going to be reading the details of that lawsuit, but I will be reading the details here in this article, since this article is online. So the article says that the men who authorities say tried to carry out a mass shooting in Yellowstone National Park last year spewed racist views months before he attempted the attack. So, ladies and gentlemen, this further states that the suspect, his name is Samson Fussner, and that he ranted about a range of issues. And not only did he do that, ladies and gentlemen, that he had a lot of weaponry on his person. So he had multiple weapons and a lot of firearms, and evidence showed that he actually planned this attack in advance, because he had been talking about it for quite some time. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I want to kind of go into some data and some statistics and further information about this particular issue. Because what I think, ladies and gentlemen, is happening is that I am of the opinion that the United States government is radicalizing its own citizens. I feel, now, that's not to say, I will issue a disclaimer. That is not to say that citizens are not being radicalized on their own, or that they're not falling into groups and groups are radicalizing them. No, that's not what I'm saying. I know that there are organizations out there, regimes out there that are looking to recruit impressionable and vulnerable individuals. I do understand that. But ladies and gentlemen, we need to be realistic about what is happening. What is happening is that, and I speak from experience, the United States tried to radicalize me. And so just to give you an example, the United States, what it did was it actually, inundated my accounts with violent content. So even if I looked at, so basically what they're doing, the US government is doing this through intelligence agencies with cyber capacities. They're not stopping crime. Um, they're not stopping these attacks. They're actually instigating these attacks, which is really unfortunate, ladies and gentlemen. But I want to go ahead and get into some research. So, ladies and gentlemen, when we are looking for answers, when we're looking for answers about extremist attacks or national security issues, or when we're looking for answers when it has to do with, if there is an incident that happens that is going global, it's within the headlines. Ladies and gentlemen, I personally don't think that it is advisable in this instance. Now, I'm not talking about other instances, but to rely on the United States, because the United States is putting out a lot of propaganda. And so, for example, there was a reporting that was done by DW News, and they said, well, the United States first said that the suspect was part of a group of people that engaged in the New Orleans attack. So this U.S. Army veteran who was involved in this New Orleans attack. But then now the United States is saying that the person is a lone wolf. And so different narratives have been being created and fabricated and manufactured from the United States government. And so, ladies and gentlemen, what I'm currently doing, so when I'm actually looking at these stories, is when I'm looking at these stories, what I'm doing is I'm looking at how they're being reported by the global community. So again, I went to DW News. This was, of course, a broadcasting station that's coming out of Germany, who I think also, or actually that I know, suffered a similar attack maybe weeks prior to that, or there was a attack. Was it Magdeburg? Is a difficult name to pronounce, but it's Magdeburg in Germany. They suffered a similar attack. And so, based on their reporting, they had a academic on the show, and his name is Bart Schuurman, and he's with the Institute of Security and Global Affairs, and that is in Leiden, Netherlands. And his perspective on national security was well informed, and it made a lot of sense. It made more sense than what the United States government was telling us. And so basically what he was saying is that the US veteran in New Orleans who was involved in this attack, basically he was saying that maybe one of the ways in which this person came to, I guess, carry out an attack, as we've seen in New Orleans, was that he adopted extremist viewpoints. And so the journalist, or so the anchor of the news station, asked him, well, how do we recognize, how do we identify a person who is prone to extremism? And so what Schuurman, the answer that Schuurman gave was that, so basically how we recognize this, ladies and gentlemen, is that sometimes people will be involved in extremist forums, or they will recalibrate who they hang out with. And so basically they will associate with persons with extremist ideologies. And so he's saying that these are the specific indicators that are, conducive or makes a person prone to engaging in extremist, violent attacks. And so again, that is a person who may be who may go on an extremist forum looking for information, a person who is recalibrating who they hang out with, and a person who is associating with people with extremist views. And so Schuurman further argues in that interview that not only will they do that, but they'll stop their education, they'll stop going to school, and they'll stop their education and going to school, not because like school no longer interests them anymore, but they'll stop it because they are hanging out with this new group of people who is radicalized and want to possibly carry out, an event that's, that's contrary to national security. And so I looked at some of the research that Bart Schuurman published recently, or I think that this was a recent piece that he published, or maybe this was like a few years ago, but it was very significant. And so basically in that piece of research that he published, he said attackers hastily labeled as lone wolves often turn out to have political and operational ties to larger networks. And so, ladies and gentlemen, the United States was first telling us that the U.S. Army veteran in New Orleans was did not carry out this attack alone, and that this person had help. Yet they changed their narrative and said, no, this was a lone wolf. But research is telling us that usually people who are labeled lone wolves have political and operational ties to larger networks. And for some reason, the United States does not want to admit that fact to us. It's really unfortunate. And so Bart goes on to tell us that extremists, they often leak their intentions months and maybe years before the attack. And so basically what he is saying in this piece of work that he published is that the kind of information that they're leaking is talking about violence, talking about attacks. They're talking about engaging in these actions that are contrary to national security. And so we get a sense that this is what is happening, that they are leaking this information in advance. And so the research in this specific article, Bart tells us that 86% of lone wolves communicated their conviction to extremism. Not only did they do that, but 58% provided indications of actual violence and intent. And so, as we can see, ladies and gentlemen, when we're talking about extremism, and so Bart, he's a professor, of course, in the Netherlands, and he has written extensively on terrorism and extremism. He has written extensively on this particular subject. And what I gather just from reading his work and the work of other scholars, and then just reading some books at the university where I am doing my master's in international human rights law, what I come to understand is that, yes, people are being radicalized, and that oftentimes what is happening is that during this period of radicalization that some people are trying to reach out for assistance, but the state, and I'm specifically talking about the state, like the government. So in this specific incident, I believe, this is just my personal opinion, I think that the United States was involved in these extremist actions, because most of these men are coming from the US military. There is often firearms involved in these cases. And ladies and gentlemen, what I really think is that the United States is not letting these people uh, out. And so the United States, what I think is happening in these cases, and so I want to be clear that I'm not talking about in all cases. Remember earlier, I articulated that there are some people who have gone through extremism and they've gone through it and they are tied to foreign groups or foreign entities. But in some cases, these persons who are being radicalized, they're being radicalized by the state. It's the state who is going undercover and covert as informants, or even hiring informants, but going undercover uh, to put these radicalization plans into operation. And so the state, what I've come to understand, ladies and gentlemen, about the United States is it does not like to lose. And it does not like to lose its grip on a specific narrative that it's putting out to the public. And so if the public is not buying the narrative that the United States is putting out, the United States is going to get very angry, and the United States is going to become more dangerous. And so that is what I'm witnessing, is that the United States is becoming more angry and more dangerous. And this falls harder on victims of radicalization, the US's radicalization, because what the United States then does is it acts as a parasite, and it keeps a hold of these victims, and it attaches itself to these victims and tries to push them to commit an act against national security, and until that, until it can say, it was this person. You see, we told you all along it was this person. See, we were trying to tell you, and now the United States is unable to do that because everybody is seeing through the United States's lies. And so recently, when the United States published, or excuse me, when the United States carried out those extremist attacks in the United States, what happened? You had media in the UK that was saying there's something that, or excuse me, this was in Germany, which the United States was probably involved in as well. But what happened in Germany was that there was an attack that happened, that Magdeburg, Germany incident, and you had the United Kingdom that said, hey, like, the math ain't mathin' in this story. Like, there is just, the pieces of the puzzle are not falling together. And so after that attack, then there was an attack in the United States. And then Americans in the United States, news stations and independent journalists and independent bloggers and social media influencers, they were like, the math is not mathin' with this particular situation. What's going on here? Like, the math is not mathin'. And so now the United States is very angry because a lot of social media influencers and individuals that are on YouTube are starting to realize that these attacks are coming from the state. It's obvious. And so I don't know why the United States is taking this path, ladies and gentlemen. It's taking a path towards totalitarianism. It's very frightening. I hope that the United States really recalibrates itself and, looks within, takes a seat and says, okay, like, let's do this over. Let's see if we can be a nation that leads by example. Let's see if we can be a nation that is not putting everyone in fear. And ladies and gentlemen, that's what's really happening, is that everyone is afraid of the United States. The United States is not leading because people are not following the United States because they respect the United States. They're following the United States because they're afraid that if they don't follow the United States, then the United States is going to do something very dangerous. And we're all afraid. Like, I'm afraid, like, I'm having conversations with people that are saying that they are afraid of the United States. They're not even citizens of the United States. And so you can kind of see like what I'm going through as a citizen in a foreign country. I'm listening to people's stories and they're saying they are afraid of the United States. Like, the United States is starting to be an international bully. Or maybe it has always been, but you know, I think that the United States can change. And I hope that the United States changes, because this kind of behavior is, it's just unbecoming of a state that has so much potential to really lead in the right direction. And ladies and gentlemen, you know who I think that's really behind these attacks that we've been seeing lately? And when I mean the United States, of course, it's the United States, but I really think that this is intelligence agencies such as the United States Central Intelligence Agency, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the US military, that these are all of these groups that are carrying out these acts of terror against the public. And it makes me afraid. Like, I am genuinely in fear. And so, ladies and gentlemen, remember the other day I said, well, that's what the state wants us to be, is in a state of fear. So we don't leave our house. So we don't do the things that we enjoy. We don't engage in the kind of activities that we appreciate and that we like. And that's really just unfortunate that the state is doing that, right? And I think that it's time for the United States to really rethink what it's doing and to really start to lead by example. And again, I'm putting out this video to not say, I told you so, or that I'm pointing my finger. No, I'm putting out this video because I'm genuinely concerned about the direction that the United States is going. Like, I'm abroad and I'm able to look at the United States from a different perspective. And as an American citizen, I'm able to look and see that the United States is really engaging in a practice that is intimidating its citizens. It's quite frightening. And so I hope that the United States really reconsiders this path, and that it, you know, that it approaches these issues quite differently. I think that that's really the most important thing to do. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. I'm your host, Kiana Canada. I am now going to be uploading my videos to Rumble because right now the United States has locked me out of my YouTube account for no legitimate reason. Like, all my content is within reason. It's a public watchdog content. And so the United States has locked me out of my account to censor me, and the United States is doing it along with the Republic of Ireland. So they are attempting to censor my content and censor my voice so that I don't get these messages out. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Please support me. Please subscribe to this channel, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.